Hello everyone, my name is Woody. Welcome to Helicon West.
Hi, Woody.
Thanks for all of you being here tonight. We're gonna have a great event. It's just gonna be open mic tonight, so let's jump into it. Helicon West is an uncensored public reading series. We host published authors and community writers to showcase all levels of skill and craft. We welcome open mic readers. We welcome donations to keep Helicon West going. You'll find a sign-up sheet for open mic and bookmarks with a QR code link for your donations over here, and then the coffee station will be over there. Please do help yourself to some decaf Cafe Ibis while you're here, because otherwise, there's no reason for us to get it, so we want to see a drink. And if you do, please make sure to use a lid. We want to keep the carpet as clean as possible. But yeah, Helicon West humbly acknowledges that we are here on the territory of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation. We are grateful for our sponsors and partners, the Sugar House Review, the Logan Library, the USU English Department, Cafe Ibis, and many community volunteers. For more information, interviews, and a bunch of other stuff, please visit heliconwest.wordpress.com. We've taken a little bit of a lull in the summer because we don't have featured readers, but we'll be right back into the full swing of it in the fall. And there's plenty of stuff from last year to read through. So without further ado, we'll jump into the open mic section. I will go grab the sign-up sheet as it stands and read us our first three names.
All right.
All right. And do feel free to sign you up for this while other people are reading. There's no time limit on that. So our first three readers are going to be Ronald Jensen, Jan, and myself.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, Ron.
Probably up to Maxine. Where would we be without you getting a pen together before the wedding? Something I always appreciate you getting them on the first date. It started about early for Franny to begin, so I'm glad to have you. It's one of my team. From remembering when. I still remember how it was back when I was visiting you on Father's Day weekend. You told me the news, or you might have been hurt. You asked me if I had a nice shirt. So you were much the same, and I was with you. They quickly changed, and days waited for you. So I keep remembering how it was then. I look forward to when I'll see you again.
Where are you gonna go?
I'm after you.
Okay. Well, not on the sign-up sheet.
Yeah, but I read it, so.
You pulled the switcheroo on that one.
MC can do what they want.
Oh, okay. You're just confusing us all. Hello.
Hi, Jen.
This one, I wrote a couple of years ago. It's about my trip to Wales and England in 2022. Part 1, Doors. Back in early 2020, when the pandemic had not taken hold of the world yet, I was planning a trip to Wales and England with my friend. She was going on a geology tour, and I would meet up with her at the end of her tour. The trip ultimately got canceled due to COVID. But then in 2022, it got scheduled again. I was a little nervous about committing to the trip. I was vaccinated and double boosted, but I had scarcely been out of the valley in the last 2 years, let alone fly halfway around the world, and by myself. But I eventually decided it was time to live my life, so I committed to the trip. Planning the logistics with Peg, my friend, should have been exciting and fun, but it was nerve-wracking. I was second-guessing my decision all the way up to the time I left for the airport. But I had committed, and I could not let her down. I had never traveled so far by myself. In my head, I broke the trip into 6 parts. the drive to Salt Lake Airport, the 9.5-hour flight to Amsterdam, the 55-minute flight to Manchester, England, the first leg of the train trip to Hereford, England, the second leg of the train trip after transferring to another train, and then getting to the hotel from the train station in Hereford. It was a long trip, and I hadn't slept or eaten properly the whole way. Once in England, changing trains was tricky, and then I only had about 10 minutes to get from one platform to another, which of course was on the opposite side of the tracks. There were lifts, thank goodness, because I was lugging all my luggage. I see now where that word comes from. I went to the lift and went up so that I could cross over and then take the lift down to the platform on the other side of the tracks. After going up, the doors to the elevator did not open, and the lift went back down again. I was the only one on it. I was getting panicky because I could not use the steep stairs to cross over, so I tried again. Again, it went up and came right back down without the doors opening. I didn't know what to do. I eventually tried one more time, and boy, was I ever surprised to finally notice that the doors were opening, but behind me. It was an incredibly quiet elevator. I felt very stupid. But I quickly gathered my luggage, crossed the way to the other side, rode the second elevator down to the platform, and made the connection to my train with only minutes to spare. My last leg of the journey was getting from the train station to Hereford to the Green Dragon Hotel. I had previously looked it up on Google Maps and saw that it was less than 1 mile. However, I was pretty tired by this time, so when I got off the train, I asked the station manager if he'd call me a taxi. He said there were no taxis running as there was a traveling fair in town and most of the roads were blocked. This traveling fair turned out to be huge. It ran for at least 6 blocks long and was bustling with people and rides, booths, noise, and everything else that constitutes a fair. It made it very circuitous to cross the roads. Anyway, after getting directions from 3 different people, no one seemed to know how to get to the hotel. Mind you, this was a relatively small town, but whatever. Anyway, I got lost. I think I was actually walking in circles. I kept stopping and asking for directions, but I was getting nowhere. I walked for probably 45 minutes. It should have been a 10-minute walk, lugging all my luggage, being dead tired, hungry, and hot, not to mention frustrated. I finally spotted the hotel across the street from where I was standing, which meant I had to maneuver through the cables and wires from the carnival rides. I was ecstatic to reach the front door of the Green Dragon Hotel, but the door would not open. I thought perhaps it was closed due to the carnival, but I saw no other entrances. The hotel was in the middle of the block, and if I had to make my way around to a back door, I was sure I would die. I stood there perplexed, trying to figure out what to do. Eventually, a man walked up and opened the door. It seems like the door opened inward, unlike American doors, and I was simply pulling in the wrong direction. Again, I felt pretty stupid. I went in, checked myself in, dropped off my luggage in my room, and headed to the hotel bar for a well-deserved drink. I made it. It wasn't pretty, but I did it all by myself.
List with me for seamless transition.
Nice.
Okay, I'm going to be reading just from a little bit of a book I've been reading called 1984. It's a little bit, as Star said, slightly apropos at the moment. If you haven't read it, you should.
There was no slightly about it.
Yeah, yeah. She did not say slightly. I added that. But if you haven't read it, you probably should. I'm reading from a section where the main character has found the single existing history book, essentially. To understand the nature of the present war, for in spite of the regrouping which occurs every few years, it is always the same war, one must realize in the first place that it is impossible for it to be decisive. None of the 3 superstates could be definitely conquered even by the other 2 in combination. They are too evenly matched, and their natural defenses are too formidable. Eurasia is protected by its vast land spaces, Oceania by its width of the Atlantic and the Pacific, East Asia by the fecundity and industriousness of its inhabitants. Secondly, there is no longer, in a material sense, anything to fight about. With the establishment of self-contained economies in which production and consumption are geared to one another, the scramble for markets, which was a main cause for previous wars, has come to an end, while the competition for raw materials is no longer a matter of life and death. In any case, each of the three superstates is so vast that it can obtain almost all of the materials that it needs within its own boundaries. Insofar as the war has a direct economic purpose, it is a war for labor power. Between the frontiers and the superstates, and not permanently in the possession of any of them, there lies a rough quadrilateral with its corners at Tangier, Brazzaville, Darwin, and Hong Kong, containing within it about a fifth of the population of Earth. It is for the possession of these thickly populated regions and the northern ice cap that these three powers are constantly struggling. In practice, no one power ever controls the whole of the disputed area. Portions of it are constantly changing hands, and it is the chance of seizing this or that fragment by a sudden stroke of treachery that dictates the endless changes of alignment. All of the disputed territories contain valuable minerals, and some of them yield important vegetable products such as rubber, which in colder climates it is necessary to synthesize by comparatively expensive methods. But above all, they contain a bottomless reserve of cheap labor. Whichever power controls equatorial Africa or the countries of the Middle East or southern India or Africa or the countries of or the Indonesian archipelago disposes also of the bodies of scores of hundreds of millions of ill-paid and hard-working coolies. The inhabitants of these areas, reduced more or less openly to the status of slaves, pass continually from conqueror to conqueror and are expended like so much coal or oil in the race to turn out more armaments, to capture more territory, to control more labor power, to turn out more armaments, to capture more territory, and so on indefinitely. It should be noted that the fighting never really moves beyond the edges of the disputed areas. The frontiers of Eurasia flow back and forth between the basin of the Congo and the northern shore of the Mediterranean. The islands of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific are constantly being captured and recaptured by Oceania or by East Asia. In Mongolia, the dividing line between Eurasia and East Asia is never stable. Around the pole, all three powers lay claim to enormous territories, which are, in fact, largely uninhabited and unexplored. But the balance of power always remains roughly even, and the territory which forms the heartland of each superstate always remains inviolate. Moreover, the labor of the exploited peoples round the equator is not necessarily to the world's economy. They add nothing to the wealth of the world, since whatever they produce is used for purposes of war, and the object of waging a war is always to be in a better position in which to wage another war. By their labor, the slave populations allow the tempo of continuous warfare to be sped up. But if they did not exist, the structure of the world society and the process by which it maintains itself would not be essentially different. The primary aim of modern warfare is to use up the products of the machine without raising the general standard of living. Ever since the end of the 19th century, the problem of what to do with the surplus consumption of goods has been latent in industrial society. At present, when few human beings even have enough to eat, this problem is obviously not urgent, and it might not have become so even if no artificial processes of destruction had been at work. The world of today is a bare, hungry, dilapidated place compared to the world that existed before 1914, and still more so if compared with the imaginary future to which the people of that period looked forward. In the early 20th century, the vision of a future society unbelievably rich, leisured, orderly, and efficient, a glittering antiseptic world of glass and steel and snow-white concrete, was part of the consciousness of nearly every literate person. Science and technology were developing at a prodigious speed, and it seemed natural to assume that they would go on developing. This failed to happen partly because of the impoverishment caused by a long series of wars and revolutions, partly because scientific and technical progress depended on the empirical habit of thought, which could not survive in a strictly regimented society. As a whole, the world is more primitive today than it was 50 years ago. Certain backward ideas have advanced, and various devices, always in some way connected with warfare and police espionage, have been developed, but experiment and invention have largely stopped, and the ravages of the atomic war of the 1950s have never been fully repaired. Nevertheless, the dangers inherent in the machine are still there. From the moment when the machine first made its appearance, it was clear to all thinking people that the need for human drudgery, and therefore to a great extent for human inequality, had disappeared. If the machine were used deliberately for that end, hunger, overwork, dirt, illiteracy, and disease could be eliminated within a few generations, and in fact, without being used for any such purpose, but by a sort of automatic process, by producing wealth which it was sometimes impossible not to distribute, the machine did raise the living standards of the average human being very greatly over a period of about 50 years at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. Have one more minute. But it was also clear that an all-around increase in wealth threatened the destruction, indeed, in some sense, was the destruction of a hierarchical society. In a world in which everyone worked short hours, had enough to eat, lived in a house with bathroom and a refrigerator, and possessed a motor car or even an airplane, the most obvious and perhaps the most important form of inequality would already have disappeared. If it once became general, wealth would confer no distinction. It was possible, no doubt, to imagine a society in which wealth, in the sense of personal possessions and luxuries, should be evenly distributed while power remained in the hands of the small privileged caste. But in practice, such a society could not long remain stable, for if leisure and security were enjoyed by all alike, the great mass of human beings who are normally stupefied by poverty would become literate and would learn to think for themselves. And when once they had done this, they would sooner or later realize that the privileged minority had no function, and they would sweep it away.
Yeah.
That's where I'm gonna stop. And our next three readers are Denise, Mike, and Tim.
Wow, that
Was
I
great.
forgot about that book.
It's a good one.
That was like a high school reading, I think, back when there was someone alive in 1984. Some of us were. Okay, hi you guys. It's really nice to be here. I haven't been here since April. So, I have 3 poems to share tonight, so.
You can tip that down just a bit. There you go.
How's that? Is that okay? Okay. This is called Flower Power. Stacks of vibrant tissue arced across the table. Piles of pipe cleaners clung together in fuzzy clusters. Small girls in brownie uniforms sat at long tables, watching as the troop leader picked up 3 sheets of bright pink tissue paper. She aligned the sheets, then folded them in half with a sharp crease, then folded that in half and in half again. After cutting off the folded edges, she held a thin stack of delicate layers. She folded up one edge about an inch and then flipped it and folded another inch back and forth as she pleated the paper into a narrow accordion, which was secured at the middle with a pipe cleaner twist. She peeled up each delicate layer until the ruffled blossom emerged. Small gasps of delight rustled across the room, soon filled with colorful laughter. 22 hands made tissue flower magic, while 11 hearts found their ability to bring beauty into the world. Okay, and this is called Fresh Eyes. I just got back from 3 weeks in Spain, and so I always like this idea of coming home, and when you come home after being gone a while, everything seems like a new life, so fresh eyes. The morning after the return home, my body still breathes from the in-between transitional space. As if for the first time, I wake into this bed of cotton sheets, my sweetheart softly breathing on the other side. A shiver traces the back of my neck as I sit on the edge of the bed, feet happy on a soft wool rug. As if for the first time, I wander through this house filled with blue-gray morning light. The floor creaks, sighs. As if for the first time, I run my hands over a textured tablecloth, peer into a sideboard of cups, admire and try several until one feels right. Boil water in an electric kettle, amazed by it all. Led by my nose, I explore other cupboards until I find coffee in a press. As if for the first time I make coffee, while a slim sunbeam reaches across the kitchen to the far back wall. Steam drifts upward, twirling through the light. As if for the first time, I'm filled with wonder. As if for the first time, another day begins. And this poem is called Love Poem to Morning, and it's after a poem by Barbara Crooker. Oh, this morning, the distant river of highway rumbles and roars. A burbling stream of house finch song splashes around me. Nearby, a mourning dove coos and coos again. Joy rises on those buoyant bubbles. I inhale an arden's green exhale. There is so much that can weigh us down, flatten us, or crush us. It's already happening to some. Many drag bulging suitcases of suffering, eyes heavy, heart empty and dry. Others carry greed-bloated bellies, no room in their eyes for anything else. And though there are power lines cutting across the horizon, the sun is apricot radiant as it ripens into day. Just off to the south, the moon grins its sideways silver smile. It doesn't seem to mind sharing the view with chimneys and rooftops. The sky inhabits the gaps in the world as easily it does the cracks in the heart.
Yeah.
Who's next?
That would be you.
Go, Mike.
They're as good as they used to. I was told this piece I wrote, part of a book I finished last year. And I was told people don't believe it, but the story is real. It's true as true. And it took place in 1968. It's called Sin City. Northern Utah. Can you hear it all right?
Mm-hmm.
Conservative to the teeth, had been my home for 28 years. Some latent awareness surfaced. Damn, I had been holding my breath for months. I was vomit, nauseous with the stale air of radical fundamentalism. It was a grinding oppression. May seem overly dramatic, but it's not. Abandonment is like being sick to your stomach all the while, denying it and lying to yourself that it was not real. I had begun thinking of the megacity, Los Angeles, get as far away as possible from Salt Lake City. I looked for a sign. Wow, I said it, didn't I? If I were still a good Mormon boy, I'd pray about it and watch for God's revealed sign. Old habits die hard. I planned to lay over one night in Las Vegas, check it out on the way. I'd been to Las Vegas before, but I'd never driven there at night. And from 100 miles out, you don't need a road map. The tremendous wattage generated by the casino signs on the strip created a dome of brightness over the desert that resembled one of those science fiction movies about a city under the sea. Hypnotic until you drive into the city itself and are overwhelmed by all the activity and the feeling of a never-ending day. Las Vegas is bordered on the east by a state of religion populated initially by polygamists, and on the west by Hollywood make-believe in the movies with Walt Disney. Sandwiched in the middle, you have what else? Legal gambling and prostitution. That should have been sign enough. That first bright sunny morning in Vegas, I found one of those advertised dollar breakfasts. A small, can't believe the name, I can't remember the name of the small casino. It was sandwiched between the old New Frontier and the old Stardust on the strip. Offered artificially colored scrambled eggs, cardboard hash browns, and toast. Toast wasn't bad. Gambling was the novelty I'd thought about, not much about, but didn't take a wizard to know what the odds were. A small, lean, black drunk was playing blackjack, and playing badly. The problem was he was winning. Didn't last long, maybe 30 minutes tops, but a small crowd had gathered, taking up roughly half the small casino. Raucous cheering roused me from the cafeteria. I edged forward and found a pit boss so frustrated he changed his tie 3 times, red, yellow, red. I assumed it was to ward off the evil that was losing his casino's money. As for the drunk, his magic was in the free drinks. I listened to the noise of the crowd and worked my way forward. The little black guy was making the most obnoxious bets. He would double down at precisely the wrong times, grin, and win. It was freaky. Almost every call, the illogical one. He would draw when the dealer showed an up card of 8, and he was holding 18. The next card was a deuce. It went like that consistently. It was insane. It was as though all the cosmic tumblers had strangely lined up in his favor, and the little drunk could do no wrong. He scooped the playoffs into a growing heap of winnings at his chest, the green and black chips spreading out past his elbows. He'd grin, push more chips into the layout for a bet, and wait for the dealer to deal the cards. The crowd cheered him on. To read the new bet, the dealer would have to reach out, stack the chips, and call the bet to the pit boss, who would, in growing frustration, nod. They always nod. It's how they get their money back. And the pit boss was growing more frustrated by the minute. For by now, even he was beginning to believe the little drunk had a special karma. You could write down every move the drunk made and entitle it, the Never Do This Rule Book. He'd stand pat on 14 instead of draw when the dealer showed a queen. And sure enough, the dealer was holding a 6 and had to draw. Bingo, another face card. The cheers from the crowd were explosive. The drinks were coming with a regularity you couldn't find in a VIP lounge. Ordinarily, the color of the free drinks would be a light lemon with too much ice, of course, and the drinks they were bringing him were deep amber with one lowly ice cube. Finally, drink after drink, even the noise couldn't keep the drunk's face out of the now respectable mound of green and black chips at his chest. Green chips, of course, were 25 and black were 100. His head would flop forward in a waning consciousness, and people in the crowd would nudge and shout. It was a losing battle. It seemed the drunken gambler was employed next door at the Frontier Hotel, where he had just finished work as a part-time graveyard cleaner, part of the part-time graveyard house cleaning crew. The free booze was more good fortune than a drinking man could turn down, and the new deck after new deck, the pit boss turning purple and out to get the casino's money back, kept nodding, yes, go ahead. A fellow employee at the Stardust had accompanied him to the little no-name casino for the same reason, to cash her paycheck before going home. She had called his wife. He's cashing his check. He's at the blackjack table getting free drinks now. A cab pulled up in front of the casino. Wife and daughter stepped out of the cab. The crowd parted and watched. Wife, accustomed to the bizarre behavior of a drinking husband, registered the entire scene the instant she walked through the door. Keen, quick eyes took in the respectable amount of green and black chips her old man was using as a pillow, along with the shifty eyes of the pit boss and the crowd of protection surrounding him. The daughter couldn't wake daddy, and wife didn't care. Working fast, she never took her eyes off the pit boss. Turning to a couple of men, she sweetly asked, would they see her husband to the cab? All the while, she was scooping up chips and putting them in every pocket she had. Her purse full, she went to her daughter's pockets. Nor did she bother to trade in the chips. Do that later. They were Stardust chips anyway. Smaller casinos often purchased and used chips from the larger casino by mutual agreement. Against the crowd of protection, the pit boss was helpless. The murmur through the crowd guessed his winnings to be maybe 15 to 20,000. The true winner rode off with her husband passed out on a daughter's shoulder, the crowd still cheering. Casino pit boss, probably take him a week to recoup the casino's losses. Cab driver, visions of a large tip. The gambler, he would remember nothing but the demon hangover. Me, it wasn't about the money or beating someone else, at the vicarious thrill of seeing someone get the better of a casino. It was about taking on a rigged system and winning. It was about a crowd of compassionate strangers, made sure the little guy, the underdog, drunk to boot, beat the odds and got out safe. I couldn't ask for a more righteous sign. I took a deep breath and let it out slow. Hot damn, I was home. I've been in Sin City for over 10 years.
That's awesome. Thanks, Mike.